All right, guys, we want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here on 2024 preview and prediction for the Baylor Bears. Dave Aranda returns 23 and 25 through 4 seasons. Jake Spavital will be the offensive coordinator, spent last year at Cal. And then Matt Powledge will be in his second year as defensive coordinator. Coming off a disappointing 3-9 effort, 53 ranked recruiting class is the worst since 2020. This program seems to be going downhill. One of the offensive side of the ball is just a disaster here. Despite having a few solid offensive linemen and a nice quarterback of Blake Shapen, they could only manufacture 23 points per game. They do bring in DeQuan Finn, though, hoping to restore some balance at Toledo. This was a good player, showcased good elusive running, good speed, really excels in the speed option game, has worked to improve his drop back passing abilities. Thrives with off-platform throwing, though. He can throw off different angles, has solid arm strength. Athletic profile is his go-to with great burst and short area quickness. Starting to want to see him be consistent through the air as well, Nick. What do you think of DeQuan Finn coming over to Baylor, a guy that probably had a couple more suitors he could have chose, settles on the Bears here in Waco?
Blake Shapen was a solid quarterback for this team last year, had a good TD interception ratio, solid completion percentage as well. But he moves on to greener pastures. Now DeQuan Finn steps in. This is a guy I love. I love watching him play. A product out of Detroit, Michigan. A really solid player, 6'2", 205. Really solid on the ground. A good player in general with some solid stats, decent passing stats as well. You and I both like watching him a lot. He spent several years at Toledo, started for the last 3 seasons, and looked good last year. 63% comp rate, 2,600 yards passing, 22 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. His most polished season as a passer, the year he looked the most comfortable passing the ball last year, and really good numbers. You saw a bit of a dip in production in terms of running the ball last year, 563 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground, which is a little bit less than what he got in 2022 and 2021, where he had a little bit higher in terms of touchdowns and yards in 2022, had less yards in 2021. But he's still a really solid player that now heads over and finds himself in the Big 12, leaving Toledo behind. I like Finn a lot. I'm super excited to see what he looks like in this new conference, a guy that's polishing himself as a passer and still is a really good dual threat option.
Finn, one of 9 transfers they added in the portal. They also returned 9 starters around him. The top 4 rushers are back, and that's going to be good news for this backfield. Richard Reese fell down on the depth chart after a good season 2 years back. He's a guy who keeps the feet moving, great slasher who hits the hole in a hurry, has shown good vision and contact balance, also good at the goal line. Staff is confident in him bouncing back this year. Dominic Richardson, a nice physical back, was the leading rusher. And then Dawson Pendergrass was a pleasant surprise as a true freshman, showcasing some nice grit and burst while staying light on his feet. Good room here for running back coach Keon Hall. This was a round game that did really struggle last year, Nick. But you get all these guys back, 115 yards per game last year. You add Finn into the mix, and I think this is a team that could certainly approach that 200 yard per game mark. Now, those are lofty expectations and big improvements, but I think the parts are here for them to certainly showcase that type of improvement.
Last year, 114 yards per game on the ground, which is just not good enough for this team. I do think getting up 200 yards is certainly possible. Maybe 175. Richardson's a really good player to return. Your top returning rusher, 519 yards on the ground. Only 1 score, so not a whole lot of red zone touches for him. Dawson Pendergrass, 338 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns from Richard Reese, 306, and 2 touchdowns for him. So solid production there. These are 3 really good backs that they return that I think are all impactful early on. Also, some of them had Pendergrass and Richardson also had a couple grabs, each of them 20 plus grabs and 3 scores between the two of them. So they're involved in the receiving game as well. So some good opportunity there for both those players. Plus Finn's feet on the ground. I do like what this running back room looks like.
Look at the wide receiver room as well, led by 5'9", 168-pounder Monterey Baldwin. Who has great speed and versatility. He's an immense deep threat that can run underneath. He is vastly undersized, but that allows to have some good quickness. Hal Presley started the year on a strong note, but ended up only playing 6 games. Should hopefully regain that momentum and be a steady contributor. He and Keytron Jackson will anchor outside wide receiver positions, averaging over 17 yards per catch for his career. In nice explosive ability for being 6'3", 208 is that of Keytron Jackson. Added Ashton Hawkins from Texas State, a productive, reliable, versatile pass catcher. Jamal Bell from Nevada had 100-plus targets over the last 2 years, but only 550 yards to show for. Josh Cameron also saw plenty of time as an outside target last year, but didn't provide much. Improved room here, capable of supplying good production. Typically got some good numbers out of the tight end in years past. Kelsey Johnson at 6'2", 248 appears next up. Also added the one tight end recruit, Michael Trigg, who's done really nothing at his 2 other schools. What do you make of this wide receiver room, Nick, where they do return 7 of their 9 top pass catchers?
This is a decent room that has some solid pieces. They return Baldwin. I like him a lot. 623 yards receiving, 16.4 yards per grab, and 4 scores. Keytron Jackson, 489 yards receiving, 17.5 yards per grab, and 1 score. Formerly playing in the SEC at Arkansas. I do think Jackson's a really good player that they have. Really solid anchor for this wide receiving core. Josh Cameron, 224 yards receiving, 10.7 yards per grab. Hall Presley, 222 yards receiving, and 13.1 yards per grab. That is some decent numbers there as well. They add some different pieces from different programs that are solid as well. Johnson is a really solid tight end. Then Trigg, what can he look like? Can he finally develop? I think this is a wide receiving room with Finn throwing the ball. That's not a bad unit at all.
You look at the offensive line, a unit that has struggled bad as of late. They returned Alvin Ebelazeli at left tackle. He was better and more consistent on the stretch and pass blocking, offered little on the ground though. Left guard was a position of strength, but now loses its key components as Gavin Byers is moving to right tackle. Clark Barrington graduates. They added Kurt Danker, though, from Ohio, now enters his 7th season of college football. Last year played his most snaps yet, and it was the best year of his career. Only has allowed 1 sack and 2,000 career snaps. Colton Price played a lot in the back half of the season at center. He was good and bad at times when players really emerged this season. They returned both assets at right guard in Campbell Barrington and Caden Saraki, both who have been really impressive with versatility. Elijah Ellis enters his 4th year as a reserve at 6'4", 331. Also added Omar Egbaedia, who was an elite right guard from Montana State. A good offensive line on paper, but they are underperformed as a unit. Have great versatility. Need to boost speed and strength, though. I think they can improve a great deal under Mason Miller as the line coach, who comes from a bit of an air grade background. I think he may have worked with Coach Leach as well. This is a respectable offensive line. Nick, again, last year they should have been a lot better than they were. That's why I picked them to be very successful, and they just were not.
This is an offensive line that I think has some solid pieces on paper. Colton Price at center, I do think he's a guy that's gotten more experience as time goes on, really solid. Campbell Barrington's a really solid right guard. Gavin Byers, I like him on the right side as well. I think both those players on the right side are very strong. Alvin Ebozi at left tackle is a good player. Kurt Daniker, a solid add out of the portal, a guy that could be involved early on and start as a starter as his first season. He was previously at Ohio, played a ton of seasons. Really good player, productive during his career at Ohio. I think it's a really solid add. I do like what this offensive line has. I think they're solid for this offense here.
Look at the verdict for the Bears. The Baylor offense is just falling off a cliff, but they bring in Jake Spavital to right the ship alongside a talented game breaker and the athletic DeQuan Finn. Baylor is a supporting cast capable of putting up 30 a game, an offensive line that can give them great balance. We'll see the offensive line improve. Ground game will take some big steps forward as Finn in this run game. The skill, will be a big reason why they can improve that balance. I think this will be a relatively improved Baylor offense overall. Look at the defensive side of the ball. This is also a unit that's just completely fallen apart, where they were just not really good at anything. They returned 7 starters. The defensive line just failed to get after it. Only had 18 sacks, lost some of their best players as well. Trey Wilson was no good in his snaps last year. Enters his 2nd season with the program, though. Tonga La Jolla has 6'2", 315. A JUCO product there. Cooper Lyons on the interior is fresh off a good season. Was one of the run defense standouts at 6'3", 270. Brendan Bett was a good quality player in his first season with the school. Should keep boosting his strength at 6'5", 290. Trevin Mai was less than stellar, but should also take another step at 6'5", 296. Devontae Tazzino only played in 4 games. Depth on the D-line isn't great, but they have some nice upside here. Obviously, what do you make of this unit that runs a 3-3-5? I think the defensive line last year disappointed. He even started in week 1 where they played Texas State, and it quickly showed how bad this team was going to be when they gave up almost 500 yards of offense, and it pretty much was this way the rest of the season.
This is not a great unit last year. The defensive line struggled a lot. There are some nice upside, though, some solid players. Trey Wilson, he returns after not having a really great season at all. 7 total tackles and 2 tackles for loss across a ton of games for him. Not a great season at all. Cooper Lands returns, a guy that equally did not have an incredible season. 34 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack for Lands. Trevin May is a guy that you want to see more out of him. 9 total tackles for him last year. Didn't look phenomenal at all last year. Brandon Brett, Devontae Lozens as well, 2 guys that just were not phenomenal either. This is a bad unit across the board, right? Brendan Bett had 9 tackles total, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack for him. You wanted to see more out of him in general. This is a poor unit. They added some players out of the transfer portal from the JUCO ranks that they hope will step up and be involved, but in general, this was not a fantastic defensive line. They struggled, didn't get a whole lot of sacks, and they got run all over.
Look at the middle of this defense. Gorman Randolph is 6'7", 250. He's been a really good player in the past for the Bears. took a big step back last year, wasn't really productive at all. Has always been a sound run defender and a respectable pass rusher at times. Steve Linton, now in his third program, has taken some big steps as a pass rusher the past 2 seasons. Should provide some good heat off the edge there. Matt Jones in the middle has been so good for the past couple of seasons, coming off his best year yet. With how he was able to, finally generate some negative plays. Has never been great in coverage and was far less consistent as a tackler, but a good standout there. Brooks Miller figures to be a full-time starter. Wasn't exactly good in his 350 snaps. Hopefully he and Jeremy Evans and even maybe Josh White can step up with another year under their belt. Aranda has proven to be a great linebacking coach. In the middle should see some big strides, but the linebacking group has just been very poor in finding consistent help alongside Matt Jones. Do you think they'll be able to this season, Nick?
I'm not entirely sure if they'll be able to do so. They do return some nice linebackers. Headlined by Jones, who's your top returning tackler, 82 total tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 5 pass breakups. Do it all linebacker, moving around, very solid player, a good leader for this team. Jermon Randolph, 23 total tackles for them, 1 pass breakup. Not terrible numbers at all for him. Decent returning production. Brooks Miller, 31 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss for him. He needs to step up this year and be involved. Jeremy Evans as well didn't really look great last year. It's a unit that has some solid pieces, but obviously being led by Jones, who is the heartbeat of this defense. Can he continue to be at that full level, get to 100-plus tackles this year? Will Randolph step up? I think those are your big questions for your linebacking unit.
You look at the secondary, unit that had some young players step up. Caden Jenkins really emerged last year as a strong run defender. An impressive coverage asset as well as a true freshman. Carl Williams was just as good in the slot, but showed the capability of being an outside corner as well. Chatu Reed was a solid coverage player, but wasn't good against the run. Likely going to take over a cornerback 2 spot as a starter. In terms of backups, Isaiah Dunson has 4 years of experience. Has never saw 100 snaps though in a season. Tevin Williams was solid in his 5 games last year, but was a horrid tackler. Should provide good depth. Safety group is quite impressive. Devin Bobby was an elite run defender. Devin Lemire really ended up regressing a great deal, but are hoping he can get back on track. DJ Coleman, on the other hand, was quite impressive, but he'll need to see the field more to have a defined impact. Kendrick Simpkins, they added him, who was a quality player from Western Kentucky. Really thrived at getting into the backfield, was an elite pass rusher. He might play that Jalen Pitre type role. They also added Snacks Johnson. Remember, he started his career at Baylor, played a couple of good years here, went to Arkansas's last season, now comes back because the transfer portal is a complete joke. What do you think of the secondary, Nick, that I think will improve immensely?
This is a secondary that I think has to improve based off what they did last year. This is a unit that does have some solid players, that they return some guys that are good tacklers and good in coverage. Devin Bobby, 76 total tackles, 6 pass breakups for him. Devin Lamar, 41 total tackles, 3 pass breakups. Caden Jenkins, 37 total tackles, 3 picks for him last year, as well as 3 pass breakups. Corey Gordon Jr. was a solid player for this team as well in various roles throughout the secondary. 30 total tackles for him, 4 pass breakups, that is. DJ Coleman, Tevin Williams, Carl Williams are all players that return as well that had some impact. Williams is a true freshman last year, 20 total tackles and 2 pass breakups plus a pick. I do like the secondary to improve. They return a lot of solid guys, added some decent pieces out of the portal as well. They were not too bad against the pass last year. Definitely the best part of this defense, 236.4 yards per game, giving up an 86 in the nation. They were not great against the run. I think the passing in the secondary will continue to rebuild and regrow as they do return a lot of talented pieces.
Look at the verdict for this defense. Still not convinced that E-line will rise to the level it should if they want to compete amongst the best. Linebacking core, some intriguing pieces due to the experience. And the secondary really has the players to thrive at a high level next season. Should see some nice improvements. The run D needs to get better. Look at the final prediction for Baylor. They failed to take any steps really anywhere last season. I picked them to win the conference, Nick. How embarrassing was that I put trust in Dave Aranda to develop this team? He did the complete opposite. This roster still has some pieces that can elevate them back to the top of the conference, though. Despite the add of DeQuan Finn and a promising wide receiver group, and the offensive line also has some upside. I'll remain hesitant on this team despite those notions, as they need to prove they can actually get better and play competent ball. But this will be Aranda's last chance, and desperation could certainly lead to better results, maybe even beating some of these higher quality opponents, Nick. 6-6 for the both of us. I'm not just going to jump the gun. Air Force is even a questionable game. They lost to them in a bowl a couple years back. At times they played hard, but overall this is a team that was just no good, and they got worse in every key area you could imagine, Nick. They played hard against TCU back in 2022, a part of a 4-game losing streak that stretched all the way into 2023, and they didn't show that same toughness against higher quality opponents. Seems like Aranda's kind of checked out. This is a guy who can land a highly coveted defensive coordinator job, and with recruiting at an all-time low, it seems he's going to be gone at the end of the year.
This is a team that certainly has their head coach on the hot seat. Dave Aranda is most definitely on the hot seat. He's in a tough spot here. I think, I agree with your assessment that he could be checked out and looking to be like many other coaches that have transitioned into being a defensive or offensive coordinator at the college or NFL level to avoid the duties of being a head coach, which has become extremely difficult with the transfer portal and NIL. This is a team that you had a lot of faith in last year. They burned you. I wasn't as faithful in them last year. I thought they had some potential to be strong, but I didn't know if they'd be able to go on and compete in the conference, and they were not able to do so at all last year. Absolutely disappointing season in Waco. This is a team that's going to have another equally disappointing season, depending on how you look on it. 6-6. Could they potentially pick off Colorado on the road? Yeah, that's certainly possible. Is Air Force going to give them a tough time? Yeah, I think so. I think West Virginia is going to give a tough time. I think Kansas, Iowa State, Utah, Texas Tech are all tough losses. I do like them to be close to Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State could potentially beat them as well. That was one where I almost had them at 5-6 or 5-7. That is, because I am high on the Pokes. I do think the Pokes are getting a lot of hate and are a little bit underrated of a team this offseason, in my opinion. This Baylor's Bear team is not fantastic. Not a really ideal place to recruit either. Tough place to kind of build a program. It looked like Dave Aranda had turned things around with some early successes, and that seems to have all been unraveled. Tough season coming up in Waco.
Yeah, that's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. It's kind of embarrassing what Baylor put together last year. Definitely think this is Dave's last year. I think if he's not fired, he's probably going to just end up resigning. These things are really tough right now. But I definitely do have them winning at home against Oklahoma State. Just a typical Big 12 game where you can see an upset there late in October. That's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me.
Looking forward to seeing what this team looks like this year.
Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.